Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our tactical breakdown series, the show in which we look at the games in an analytical and statistical way with the help of a couple of people throughout. And today's no different. We're basically having to go through the pain, is what we're describing it as, of analytically breaking down games in which we will lose. We've been quite blessed so far this season for the first time winning our first 2 matches in 9 years, which is amazing. But it was going to end at some point, and unfortunately it had to end on match day 3. But if there was one team that you expected Arsenal to lose against, it was most likely going to be the European champions, of course, being Liverpool. But we're going to break down the reasons why, some of the positive points from it, but ultimately looking at the key areas where Arsenal need to improve moving forward. And I'm going to do that with the help of my good friend Graham Brooks. Unfortunately, Drew isn't here this week because he's very, very busy, but it means you get a double dose of Graham, so be thankful for that. So let's jump straight into things and talk about the summary initially of the game. Now, when we win fixtures, often we like to start these talking about the man of the match, but because we lost, I kind of want to focus on this as a summary, and to do that I'm going to pass straight over to Graham, who's going to give you his thoughts on how the game played out.
I think Emery has come in for a lot of criticism of the strategy on Saturday, but I don't think the strategy was the problem. I think it was the execution. He went with the diamond. We've been there before and played expansively and got beaten, so he decided to play narrow and compact with a diamond midfield floor, give him a diamond midfield 4, give him the wide areas and then deal with the crosses. And I have to say that for most of that game it worked. 27 crosses, we dealt with them all. We only conceded from set plays and from 2 moments of David Luiz madness. The idea really was, with Liverpool playing the high line, to defend narrow and compact and hit him on the counter using Pepe and Aubameyang's pace in wide areas. Had Pepe taken his chance at 0-0, it might have been different. But in the end, obviously 3-1 defeat is a heavy defeat. But I think it wasn't the strategy that let Arsenal down on Saturday. It was the fact that, in my opinion, they failed to execute the plans.
They're employing the tactic that I used to great effect yesterday of recording outside. It's definitely becoming a thing in this summer heat, and it's getting ridiculous, more ridiculous by the day. And of course you can go check out the raw reaction show we did from the result yesterday, which is of course on the channel. But picking up on some of the points that Graham mentioned, I think definitely the formation is the part to focus on here. You saw the formation on screen when Graham was talking, but I want to show you on screen now the average positions of the players on the pitch. And actually, whilst we tried to deploy that midfield diamond, actually the way that Liverpool pressed us and basically manipulated our shape, it became even more flat the further the game went on. And by the end, you can clearly see on the screen there that our midfield has been compressed and crunched together. And in fact, Ceballos is playing even deeper than that of Joe Willock, who was supposed to be slightly deeper than that of the Spaniard. And we've now got a situation where Xhaka is still central, but Guendouzi and Ceballos are so close to him on average that when we actually tried to break out from the back, the press from Liverpool crunched us in so much that it meant the mistakes were so frequent that it left us really, really exposed at times. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about how we were caught out at the back in certain situations. But I want to move on to the section and part of what Graham talked about. We've done this in the first 2 games against Burnley and Newcastle, and that's costly crossing. We saw it begin against Newcastle with crosses being allowed into the box. Burnley again continued against a team in which Burnley are very, very good at crossing and very, very good at converting those chances. Liverpool have got the best 2 fullbacks across the entirety of Europe, and we decided to employ a tactic of allowing them to cross pretty much as much as they like, which led to more crosses being conceded than any of the 2 games we've already played so far this year. We did deal with them in certain aspects, as Graham said, heading them away when needed by Socrates and by David Luiz. But unfortunately, the frequency of that did tell, and in certain areas it meant that it's the reason we did lose this game, unfortunately. You can have a look at the screen now. You can see the crosses of where they came from. Now, the high majority of them are going to be from just outside the box on the right-hand left flank. But it was actually the variation in the type of crossing that we failed to deal with in some areas and dealt with quite well in others. Now, the ones that we did deal with quite well is that we dealt with the ones that were lofted into the box. David Luiz and Socrates very good in the air, and they were able to head those balls away with relative ease. It did mean that we were put under more pressure, and sometimes aerially we can be challenged in certain aspects of our game, and that meant that ultimately when we did concede the goal, it was from an aerial header from Joel Matip. But the balls that were going into the box box that were in the hair from the open play were definitely dealt with, or actually you could argue that Robertson and Alexander-Arnold didn't have their best game because some of their deliveries were overhit or inaccurate, and it meant that Liverpool couldn't really be as effective as they might have wanted to be. But there were actually opportunities in this game where Robertson and Alexander-Arnold's choice of crossing really left us in a state of confusion and really quite vulnerable, and that was their low driven crosses across the box. The balls that came in weren't quite good enough to reach the likes of Firmino and Mane in the situations that you can see on your screen, but they caused Arsenal a lot of problems to react in those quick situations. And whilst they can deal with the lofted balls quite well, it was actually the driven crosses that presented the greatest amount of danger to Arsenal, and ultimately that's what led to Arsenal conceding their second goal. But we're going to talk about the goals in just a second. I want to talk about being caught out at the back first, which was another way that we were trying to play out from the back, which was a really hard technique to do. Now, when Emery first came in at the start of last season, we saw this being done where it was Pepe at the time, would have to play the ball out to the right or left hand side of the box instead of hoofing it up long. And that meant we were under pressure very quickly, and it took a long time for us to sort of deal with that and even develop in a way where we tried to escape from that initial plan. Now that came back against Liverpool. Leno was pushing the ball out wide to his fullbacks or to the centre-backs, and we tried to play out from a team that pressed better than almost any team across Europe, and that led to mistakes. Dani Ceballos was caught in the middle of the park quite often. He was also caught with Pepe and Guendouzi on the right-hand side. You can see there the triangles being made by the Liverpool players to condense that situation and make it extremely difficult for the Arsenal players to play out from the back. Guendouzi in one instance actually ended up just passing it off the right hand side of the pitch because he just couldn't do anything with the ball, and I think that was certainly something that Arsenal didn't do so well. Graham talked about how we needed to play the ball in behind and over and actually go over the top of the press in order to try and get the best out of the game. We didn't do that often enough. There were examples where we tried, but often it was rushed, and often it was actually a result of being pressured into situations where we had to then hoof it up the field because we had to get out and relieve ourselves of the immense pressure that was on those players. Now I want to go on to talk about Liverpool's goals, which obviously was part of the crossing we've talked about previously, and actually their corner came from a cross from Alexander-Arnold. It wasn't a particularly accurate one, but it was one where the pressure eventually told towards the end of a first half, where it was relentless and continuous attack, and the peppering of our box and crosses did tell. Xhaka tried to get a foot on it, it went out for a corner, and it's from that corner in which we conceded. The ball came in and we were so focused on trying to deal with Virgil van Dijk, David Luiz and Socrates in particular, that Matip was allowed Matip if you want to go for your Spanish pronunciation, but Matip was able to peel off the back of our defenders and get over Socrates and head the ball into the back of the net. We know that from corners we can be vulnerable at times. We've shown that under our time at Arsene Wenger. I thought it was something that we've improved with, but I think we were so preoccupied with the danger that Virgil van Dijk, which you could even argue that we fouled him in that scenario, and that's why he was so annoyed when they did score, and hadn't even realised that Matip had scored. But I think it's certainly something that Arsenal need to focus on, is that they need to be more aware of all the players in that box and not solely focusing on the person they think is most dangerous, because a goal can be scored by any of those players. If we move forward then, talking about the goal which led to their penalty, this was again a low ball into the box. Yes, it wasn't necessarily what I'd describe as a cross because it was from further back, and it was more of a pass into the box from just outside of it, and it wasn't necessarily a cross, but it was one of the low balls that was driven into the box, and it was found Firmino that was then laid off to Salah. And David Luiz in this situation, I have no idea what he's doing. He's got the player's shirt, he's pulling it very viciously, and that's obviously, in this day and age where we've got the video assistant referee, it's going to lead to us conceding a penalty, and it did, and Salah put it away extremely professionally, as you'd expect from the Egypt international. Now there was a scenario with Virgil van Dijk, and I talked about this on the Raw Reaction show. I'm not going to discuss it in too much detail because I already did on yesterday's. If you want my main reaction, you can go and check out that video. But for me, I think bottom line is that this was definitely a penalty for David Luiz's scenario, but in terms of Virgil van Dijk, I just don't think the contact is significant enough for it to be deemed a penalty in that scenario. It wasn't impeding Pepe. It wasn't in the same sort of scenario where Salah's actually got away from his man. Pepe certainly hadn't gotten away from Virgil van Dijk towards goal. He was moving away from goal and he was holding on to him. If he'd have pulled away from it in a manner in which Salah did, I think maybe there would be more of a case, but I don't think it was in that scenario. And if you want to get my full reaction from that, please do go check out the Raw Reaction show from yesterday. I want to now move on to talk about the third goal. And what's really annoying about the third goal is that at 2-0, you're still in the game. You've got an opportunity. There's still over half an hour of the match left. It came just after half-time, the second goal. You've got plenty of time. You want to keep it compact, keep it your ability to counter effectively as stable as physically possible, and we completely stopped that with the third goal. Xhaka in this scenario is so far up the pitch when Liverpool are in possession that it then means that Monreal is dragged out. But before we get to that scene, you can see on your screen there that Xhaka is pushed up to Fabinho after he's been laid the ball by Alexander-Arnold. Yes, he's pressured him. That means he has to then play a first-time ball. But this first-time ball is so good that it catches out Nacho Monreal in this second scenario of the scene, which then leads to Salah being in so much space that David Luiz has to rush to close him down, which makes it much, much easier for Salah to then round the player who's already on a yellow card, and that's why you couldn't really take him out, or you definitely couldn't take him out because it would have been a red. But Salah's so easily able, with his brilliant technical ability, to take it round, that we're so exposed that he's easily able to then run into the box and score. But Nacho Monreal and Xhaka were hugely caught out here. Nacho Monreal looks like he's going to be off. Maybe that you can say it's a positive if this is going to happen. But Kolasinac, for me, is no more disciplined than the Spaniard. In fact, he's probably less disciplined. And we've got to hope that Kieran Tierney can come back in a lot more fit and ready to take on those games and move forward. Now, before we move on to the final piece, which is talking about how actually we had some positives in Pepe's performance, I want to head back to Graham, who's going to talk about our front line and how we could have done better in an attacking sense.
I think Emery's offensive strategy on Saturday involving Pepe and Aubameyang in wide areas would have been made by watching Liverpool this season. They have played a higher line. He would have known that they like to get the two fullbacks, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robinson, high. And so the idea really was to try and isolate Van Dijk and Matip one-on-one with Aubameyang and Pepe. And we saw in the first half this worked quite effectively. We saw how Pepe dribbled past Van Dijk, and also he got through on goal when he had that chance at 0-0. We also saw in the second half Pepe slid in Aubameyang, who got forward into an attacking area where he could have got a shot off, and it was blocked. So that offensive side of the game that did work for Arsenal on Saturday. I think the problem they had was probably when they got it forward to Pepe and Aubameyang, not getting Ceballos or a player up around to support these two strikers. I think the other problem on Saturday was playing out. I would have thought they would have gone probably longer over the press, because Liverpool pressed really high with Arsenal playing out from the back. Had they done that and then got a player like Willock or Ceballos around Aubameyang and Pepe, we might have been more effective going forward. But he chose to play up slowly from the back. We didn't progress the ball quick enough, in my opinion, and that led to turnovers and Liverpool continually pressurising up.
Thanks to Graham for contributing once again to Tactical Breakdown. Hopefully we'll see him back again next week. But I think there he highlights everything was needed by the attack. We didn't really lack the reinforcements from the midfield to an attacking two, which really couldn't damage Liverpool as much. But there were certainly chances that we had in the game for them to score. And had we have taken them, as Graham said in his first extract, had we have executed the plan like we needed to by taking our chances when we hit them on the counter, we could have got a lot more out of this game than we actually did. Now, if we look at Pepe's performance in particular, it's something that I want to highlight. You can have a look in there at some of the chances that he's taken, some of the chances that he failed to do so. And in fact, he didn't take any of his chances, and that was the issue with it. And he could have actually been a little bit more conservative in his play. In the game when we talked about Burnley, Drew talked about how we needed to be a little bit more direct, how we didn't really initiate as much attacking flair and final ball chances that we could have done. Now, Pepe is very much the opposite of that. He likes to go and attack teams. He likes to take shots. But that can obviously lead to some chances going awry because a rash shot has been taken, and a chance where, yes, a shot was a feasible opportunity, and he did get some of those chances in the game. But he still hasn't got that little bit of Arsenal in him yet, which then leads him to make that decision to play a pass through to get someone through on goal. And this certainly happened a couple of times against Liverpool. You can see in this first scenario here, Pepe has that shot that goes wide, just wide of Adrian's goal on the right-hand side of his net. But Guendouzi is running through the midfield there, and he runs past defenders and he finds a perfect space for Pepe to then lay the ball through, but Pepe doesn't see that, and actually it leads to him shooting and missing when we could have had a much more realistic chance of scoring if Guendouzi had been played in to either have a shot himself, or you can actually see Aubameyang there in a prime position, a prime Aubameyang position to be in a poaching area to maybe take away a cross that Guendouzi would then put in. So that was a big mistake for me that I think we could have done better in that scenario. And then you've got another one here, Pepe shooting from just outside the box again. This was a much closer shot, which is a really good chance for us to score, but again there was an opportunity to slip in Aubameyang in that scenario. Van Dijk and the space that left between him and Wijnaldum there is a pass available for Aubameyang to run on through and have a one-on-one opportunity with the keeper. Yes, Pepe is going to bring a lot more to the team in terms of his attacking style and how he has more shots on goal, which we'll much enjoy, and hopefully we'll see him score a lot. But it was just in those scenarios where I thought he could have been a little bit more smart in playing some of or some of his teammates through on goal. Now, the last one I want to talk about is obviously the chance he had when he was one-on-one with Adrian, in which he failed to take that chance because he hit it straight at the keeper. Now, this is unfortunately something that Pepe really needs to work on. It's not something that's a one-off. It's something that he's done before, and he's got fortunate in the past. If we have a look at the game in which he played against PSG for Lille, he's one-on-one with the keeper here for PSG. I believe it's Buffon in the scenario, and he actually manages to score past Buffon, but the shot goes past him in a way that's so close that if Buffon was able to stick a foot out quick enough, like Adrian did, it would have stopped it. And this is part of Pepe's game that he needs to really improve on. He needs to work on the way that he finesses the ball around the goalkeeper when he's one-on-one, and definitely in this scenario when he's heading straight through on goal. If he's on the right-hand side and he's cutting in onto his left, he's very, very good in that scenario. But it's when he's more central that he needs to work on how he opens his body up to then shift the ball to the left-hand side of the goal and past the keeper. He got very lucky in the PSG game. It didn't happen in the Liverpool game, and that was enabling Adrian then to make the save, and obviously we missed a key chance to go 1-0 up. But overall, I think there was some positives to take from the game. If you look at it as a whole, in the summary we looked at the start, and Graham summed it up really well, we just didn't really execute the plan that we wanted to implement. I think that the plan was decent in some ways. I would have changed the way we accepted so many crosses, and I would have personally tried to press their fullbacks and try and recover possession much earlier to hit them on the counter more effectively and get them behind those left and right wing slots. And I also would have changed the formation and played with our front three from the beginning. I just felt we lacked a little bit of, I don't want to use the word gusto, but I definitely think that's the descriptive way to describe it. We lacked a little bit of edge without our attacking three, and I think that hurt us a bit more. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. I hope that's covered as much as feasibly possible for your tactical desires, and if you've enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe if you're new around here with those notifications turned on, so that when we do our live shows you can jump into our live chat and have your say and ask us the questions. I'll see you again very, very soon, and as always, up the Arsenal.